everybody. It is February 9th, 2020, and this is your episode 218 of the At Percussion podcast, which is going to be released on February 19th. With me today, as always, are Carly.
Hi, everyone.
Ksenia.
Hello, hello.
And Casey, who is currently superballing every object available in his office.
I just found this fork. Should we try it? Are
you ready?
Harder than it looks.
Failed in life.
What are you doing with the Super Bowl right now? Oh, Casey?
What?
I said, are you writing a piece with Super Bowl, or why do you have a Super Bowl mallet on your desk?
No, it's just here. My recital was last Tuesday. I needed a Super Bowl for a gong. It's actually a cool effect because I play this piece behind the gong, so you can't see my face. You can just see my hands like in front of the gong, and you reach out and like kind of like rub your hand across the gong, but you do Super Bowl behind it, so it seems like you're kind of touching the gong inappropriately. It's fun.
Hey, I have a Super Ball question. I've always wondered about this. Does anybody actually call a bouncy ball a Super Ball?
I thought they were. I don't think anymore, but I think they were once called that. I think there was some toy company called them Super Balls, and they were those. God, they had those swirls of red and white is the main color. Maybe blue, red, and white, and maybe green. They were real, kind of looked like a weird toxic planet.
I didn't know they were named after the toy. I thought because Emil Richards used them so famously, I thought that Emil Richards came up with the name, but I could be wrong.
That could be Super Ball. I'm looking it up.
But anyway, while Casey looks that important information up, our guest today is Josh Roberts. Josh is a drummer and composer recognized for his genre-blurring approach to musical situations and improvising. He's currently based in New York City, and he performs and records extensively in North America, South America, and Europe. And he is also an adjunct instructor at New York University. So welcome, Josh.
Thank you guys so much. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So before we got started today, so we all take turns sort of booking guests, and Josh was my guest that I booked, and Josh is one of the few I've booked that I actually don't really know very well, but I discovered Josh a few years ago because one of my favorite musicians on the planet is Jacob Collier, and Josh has this incredible video of adding a drum track basically to Jacob's version of the Flintstones. So Josh, could you tell us about how you came up with that? And I saw you also had another one you did, I think more recently, of one of Jacob's little Instagram stories or something like that.
Yeah. Okay, so I that is usually I will walk around. I've gone to Juilliard for rehearsals or whatever, and people will stop me still and be like, "You're that Jacob Collier drum guy, right?" It's like, yeah, that is me. But there could be worse things to be known for, or recognized for. So. But so essentially, and this kind of maps out my whole social media identity, I guess, and what I do, which we can get into later. But so I was at Indiana University. I did a jazz performance degree for my undergrad, originally from Missouri, and then I moved there for school. And it was my senior year, and there was a little place called Ford Hall in there. And basically, since I was a kid, I used to listen to classical music. And I used to put drum parts to it. I used to be like, man, why can't I, especially guitar. I've always been obsessed with guitar players, and I wanted to be able to express that dense melodic, technical content on the drums, essentially. So I messed around when I was a kid, and then got to college, dove into jazz fusion, blah, blah, blah. It kind of went away. And then I remember hearing this Flintstones track, and then a drum part just kind of started popping out to me as I was just listening to it over and over and over. And I remember I filmed it with a little Zoom camera in our recital hall, and no fancy audio. I went straight from Zoom to upload. I didn't know anything about color grade, anything crazy. And I do remember, too, it was the first day I decided to stop wearing glasses, which was kind of a good move because I've never really gone back to wearing glasses. Well, I should, but I never do. But so anyways, and I remember when I did it, it took forever. It took God, man, I literally did I'd probably say up to 75 takes or something because it was all in one, and it's all a memorized part. There wasn't any improvising. And I didn't have any multiple angles, so I did it. And I always have done that. All my YouTube videos and my Instagram videos is all one take. But I am a bit of a perfectionist, and so I just went over and over. And I remember I finished it, and I was like, "That's cool. I don't know if I'll ever do anything with it, but at least I have it." And then about a week later, I decided to upload it, and it was one of those things that within a few hours you could tell something was going to happen. People started sharing it. I think it was a good time for Facebook when Facebook was still kind of had an agreement with YouTube. And I think they tried to buy YouTube and it failed. And so they shove YouTube videos down the algorithm a bit now. But it just started popping off. And then sure enough, now we're here and you're talking about it.
Can you,
and so
speaking of...
Real quick, two things. One, Casey, one of my students is practicing your theatric number 5, or whatever the marimba one, meditation number 5.
Something like that. Excellent.
Yeah. Anyway, you might hear that in the background. It's a little cool background audio track. But yeah, I was just going to say that video now has, it looks like over 250,000 views, 286,000 views. So it's definitely a hit, so to speak. But sorry, Casey, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to ask, well, speaking of these views, I saw you also have like Aphex Twin, you have Kendrick Lamar. Is the only risk of, like, say, okay, I want to play drum tracks to something that's already published, or maybe at least in that YouTube we will flag you algorithm, is the only risk you can't monetize it? How do you check up on that?
Yeah, so basically what you can do, you can go into your I have it up right now, your creator's dashboard on YouTube, and you can actually search which songs are free from monetization before you do it. And to be honest, that's what kind of discouraged me a bit from there. Was I did try to upload a couple things, and I tried to do Kendrick Lamar and the EMG company or whatever. Just basically, they took it down immediately, and then I got a notice saying your account could be in danger of being permanently deleted. And but then I look back, I look at like Dave or Luke Holland and some cats that I really dig and enjoy, and I'm kind of like, man, I kind of should have stayed on that, but such life. So
I've run into it with this podcast before because I just want to play like a little bit of one of our guests or something. And yeah, sometimes it'll just say, oh, you can't monetize this, which is fine, great. We don't monetize any of these. But other times it can't publish the episode at all. So that's great. I will use that search function.
Yeah.
I did not know about that.
Well, just to go back to that video for a second, I thought it was so awesome that I actually recorded my own couple of little Jacob Collier covers as well. And it's cool because Jacob has like his like favorited videos or whatever. And if you look in there, he actually like favorites all the covers of his videos. So like Josh is in there, mine's in there too. But for anyone that's not familiar with Jacob Collier, I mean, just absolutely mind-boggling in every musical sense, rhythm, harmony, melody. I mean, everything is just insane. And in particular, that Flintstones track, I remember seeing someone did a vocal transcription of it, which to transcribe that stuff, which June Lee does a lot of that, is crazy to me. And he sneaks things in like 5-lits that you don't even catch. And so could you tell us about, and there's usually like a weird little 7/16 bar in there or something. Could you tell us about your process toward, I mean, I know you said it was all memorized and just sort of done in your head, but your process toward creating that Flintstones track?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, and this is still what I do for all my Instagram clips, which if people haven't checked it out, essentially I kind of do the same thing. I take somebody's instrumental track or a pop track that has minimal drums on it or something that kind of gives me a platform to be able to put some drums over it. But what I do is I just listen to it over and over, and the part popped out. And honestly, I basically kind of wrote it in my head until I sat down and I started kind of shedding it out, but I never wrote anything down. And then I came here and I started studying with Ari Hoenig, and Ari was like, one of the few first lessons, he's like, oh yeah, you're the Jacob Collier. And he's like, man, that bridge is so dope. It goes like a large 3 over it, and then he jumps to 4 and then 5 and then 6. And then I go back and I was like, oh yeah, there's this basically the kind of swing, the slow bridge where I start slow, and 4, it's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then it cuts off. And I was like, oh yeah, that's true. But I can certainly write everything out, and I love that. And there's a lot to be said about being able to articulate those things for technical reasons and teaching reasons. But I think most importantly, man, you got to just internalize that and be able to. I still occasionally pop it up, a secret. I still pop it up and make sure I can play it because I know I'm going to be called one day to play that in a clinic or something. So.
I was going to ask, speaking of social media and teaching, you teach at New York University, and it's been on, is that right, New York University?
Well, I saw that and I meant to message you about that. That I need to update my website. That was when I did a master's, and then our title while I was teaching piano, actually. They put us in the Steinhardt music department as adjunct faculty teaching piano. So that ended just last summer, but I did it for 2 years out there.
Oh,
so.
cool. Okay, cool. Well, I think all the same. Speaking of teaching, we're on a job search right now. We've had candidates coming on and off campus for the last couple of weeks for a new department chair, and so much conversation is geared around like tradition mixed with innovation. And of course, something that always comes up with innovation is how should we be talking about marketing to our students and how they should market themselves, and how you, a teacher, should be marketing to attract students and that sort of thing. And of course, social media is just like omnipresent in this conversation. And I was just going to ask you, like, you've had such a successful social media growth, and like, how do you think we should teach students to do this, or should we?
Yeah, I think what's important to note, and I tell younger cats this when I meet them here in the city or whatever. I wasn't even on Instagram when I was in undergrad. I mean, I was practicing like y'all did, or doing right now.
I wasn't even on MySpace in undergrad.
It
didn't exist.
You're an undergrad, Casey?
There wasn't even YouTube when I was in undergrad.
YouTube came out when I was
so old, ancient.
None of that existed. Anyway, I had to put that in there.
Absolutely, but I think there's this is a big topic. I think it is important to have our websites, our universities or whatever, current and looking attractive, to just in general attract people. It needs to be contemporary looking, because we have TikTok and we've got Instagram that looks awesome. And so now I'm applying to a jazz school and it looks like a 70-year-old is running the website. Come on, I think we can do better in that. But there's a balance. I think going to college, university is a unique opportunity that is really a time to get away. I mean, that's what I did. I was in Indiana cornfields. I got away and I really got my stuff together. However, it was, 2015 was a bit different than now, where it does feel like if you're not on it, this huge FOMO, where am I at? I need to be on this, I need to be on that. And that's what students are dealing with now. And I think instead of just, taking it completely away, I think you need to say, okay, healthy way is like, man, you're shedding, and then you check out Mark's post at Rockwood last night. Dope. I just got inspired. Okay, back to the shed, turn your phone off. There's a balance of being able to do that and being patient too. Like, I didn't get 250,000 views in a week on YouTube. It took time. I didn't get my IG followers. It took time. So just being patient,
Well, and the cool thing is that, I guess the comforting thing is that if people make stuff as good as your, say, Flintstones video, it will get shared. Often I hear this fear of saturation, like, oh, there's so much out there. Why is it even worth doing? You can't break through. It's like, yeah, but are you writing stuff as good as Josh's Flintstone video? Probably not. So it's cool.
Thank you.
Well, one thing I would ask to follow up with that, I think one thing that's so important is just curating the content that you put on social media or you put on the web. Do you have any advice, Josh, about how to curate like professional content and keep the quality and all of that?
That's a great question. The first underlining thing I would say, and I was at a PASIC, because Indiana has PASICs in Indianapolis quite often. I was there and I went up to John Riley, still at MSM now, and obviously playing and teaching legend. And I was like into my first year or something. And I was like, hey, I've got into Joe Jones and Philly Joe Jones and Max's records and a little bit of Elvin. And I was like, what's next? And I remember, I'll never forget, he told me, what are you into? What are you into the most? Because that's what you're going to go the deepest on. And so I would say with social media, the reason why I didn't take maybe a Luke Holland path or whatever, where a career is only YouTube or something, which it's not. I mean, he does some other stuff, but I loved making that video, and everything on my IG I love making, and I just use my heart as my guide. If I liked recently this Polyphia guitarist, and I put in time and I learned it, because that's what you will go deepest on. So if somebody's like, I don't know really where to start, on this or whatever, just figure out, what are you into most? Are you into Indian folk music and putting that on, making tabla videos? Then commit to that and do that. And then to address your kind of quality piece, I think it's super important these days. Just buy a used DSLR camera for $290. There are YouTube videos that are Casey Neistat or whoever filming their whole vlog on a Galaxy Note, and now these kids are walking around with these kids. I sound so old, but these kids, but they've got 6 cameras on the front of their phone, and it looks great. I have a gig tonight. My roommate's coming, and I'm just going to give them my iPhone instead of taking a camera, because it takes great quality, so I say don't worry so much about, it's taken me a while to have my little setup, brick wall, which all it is it's a light, $75 in front of my living room brick wall. And then I use a handheld recorder for audio, and I put it through GarageBand. Like, it's very doable to do what I do, actually. I would just say the place where stumps people is just getting started. And I say, figure out what's in your heart, what you enjoy, and then boom. And it's going to take a while, but start from there.
You mentioned John Riley at PASIC. I just wanted to share my cool John Riley at PASIC story. So I was at PASIC sometimes around like 2009 or so. And I was like a super nerd and had on my UNT drumline jacket. And John Riley famously went to UNT, and John Riley just walks up to me and he goes, "Hey, I like your jacket." And I would turn, I was like, and he goes, "Hi, nice to meet you. I'm John Riley." And of course, this is the guy that literally wrote the book on jazz drumming.
Yep.
Like, I just remember I shook his hand and I just said, "I know who you are."
I think he had a bet with like his other drummer buddies, like Dave Weckl and Steve Smith were in the corner. They're like, "Hey, go up to that jackass, tell him."
He was there with Horatio Hernandez.
Exactly. See, they were told, "Hey, go up to that guy and just light him out."
I had a little talk at a bar with John Riley and Horatio Hernandez.
That's cool.
I definitely haven't talked to them since then.
I've talked to Horacio before. He's so nice. I don't think I've ever spoke to John Riley, but Horacio is super nice. Yeah.
Ksenia, sorry.
So I had a question. You live in New York now, right?
Yes, in Harlem right now.
Cool. And you've traveled a lot. You've been to North America, South America. Well, obviously you've been to North America, and Europe. And there are so many different jazz traditions. And I find that a lot of my friends who do a similar thing to you, they can really differentiate between the audiences and, just in general, gigging, culture and so on. So my question for you is, especially now that you live in the Mecca of jazz, can you give us a little bit of a compare and contrast? I saw that you were in Graz. Graz is a really big center for jazz in Europe. So I was just wondering, is there a way that you could tell us, boom, this is what Brazil is like, this is what Austria is like, this is what America is like?
Absolutely, yeah. Man, I love Europe. I've fallen in love with Europe. But New York is always home. It's the first thing that always pops in my head is Europe in general has such an appreciation, really music in general, but especially jazz. And that I think that could be argued that partly access to it, or or I don't know, just in general, their countenance is just so sweet and so appreciative. But they and what's awesome too is it's a spectacle. It's always a listening room, a concept of like I was at the Bitter End 2 nights ago playing, and the whole entrance and bar area is just chatter, 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 and there's kind of a ballad moment going on. That would never occur in Europe, ever. And so Europe is incredible that way. It's always been appreciative, and I'm always treated incredibly when I'm over there. I haven't been to Asia. I've been to Azerbaijan, which is technically in Asia. The Middle East and Asia was what I was told, but it is a quite different culture. But it was still the same. They were very, very appreciative. South America, amazing. Costa Rica, I was down there, and the same thing, especially when you get a place where it's kind of landlocked or waterlocked or whatever, it was just yeah, I mean, it's kind of anywhere other than America where we're a bit entitled. As I'm circling around, I'm saying, okay, well, it's kind of anywhere other than here. But and what's interesting too is even in the States, having traveled around the States is quite interesting to see. Going back, I'm from the Midwest. Going back to the Midwest and going to the West Coast. I was just there for NAMM, but I go back and play with a few artists out there, and kind of still going back in jazz history to like cool jazz and whatnot happening in West Coast. I would say it's still there, be it the weather or whatever. It's still a little bit more chill, and whatnot. And but yeah, so everything, even within Europe, everything has been a bit different, and stylistically is interesting. Truly, ECM, European Contemporary Music, the label, is kind of an over dominating sound. I feel like in the jazz world in Europe, it still has somewhat of a straighter eighth note approach to it. The swing is a little bit more like Jan Christensen. That kind of sound is very much made quite an impression. I think still is present over there. So.
And how do you feel about the scene in New York? I mean, that's where everybody wants to come. So the competition is incredible, but so is your listening experience. You can go out any night and just hear a great concert or play a great concert. What's that been like for you?
It has, I would say it's actually been life-changing, and I don't even understate that enough. Because and I also live in the city. There's definitely a vibe with living in Brooklyn outside of Manhattan. It feels like a whole different city, and it's great. But living here, when I walk out, is still Apollo Theater, and it's the home of jazz, Harlem. You can't help but not be pushed and challenged. I feel like, because my roommate's a jazz drummer. My other roommate is jazz guitarist, and then my other roommate works at Smalls and has forever. So we all know kind of the same people, and we just had a rehearsal in here. I came back from the gym to a rehearsal, and it's like that. I don't know if ask me in 10 years if that's still happening. Maybe I have my own studio, or something like that. But at the time being, it's really. And it's like, and you know what? I think Wayne Krantz told me this the other day I was hanging with him at his gig, and he was like, I was complaining about the winter. I hate the cold, to be honest. I don't know how I'm here, but I hate it. And he was like, yeah, he's like, you know what? That's part of the New York sound, though. He's like, the winter here is part of the sound. Having your train delayed, taking an hour and 15 minutes for me to get to my gig tonight. And then, you've got the wind biting you in the face, taxi drivers yelling at you, somebody's bumped you in the subway, somebody's throwing up in the subway. Now you finally get to your gig. I'm like ready to play, I didn't just come here to have great conversation. Like, it's time to throw down now, and that's really influenced and shaped. It's funny if you watch that Collier thing and then you watch my playing now, even to this last, that was HER music, her music song called Best Part that he did with Daniel Caesar. And yes, I did that. And it still is the most popular Instagram clip. Anything that I do with Jacob, it seems like it's people grab it. But what was he say? Oh, but if you look at my playing really from New York, it's, just technically wise, it's gotten more staccato, it's gotten stronger, it's maybe gotten a little bit more dense, but definitely more controlled and just matured for sure. But I think with a sound, with a bit more of a brashier sound, I guess. I don't know. Yeah.
With all those cab drivers yelling, you have to.
That's right. That's right.
Well, since we're talking about New York, and you mentioned Ari Hoenig earlier, we actually had Ari Hoenig here where I teach in, I guess it was March. It was in the last spring, about a year ago, for our jazz festival. I actually picked him up at the airport in my car. But Ari was a super nice guy, really fun to talk to. And then when he got here, I mean, just watching him play was just an experience. That's all I can say. And you also studied with Steve Houghton at IU. So, I mean, your pedigree here is pretty off the charts. Could you tell us about studying with both those guys? And I mean, just I can't imagine weekly lessons with someone like Ari Hoenig.
Yeah. I was thinking about this because I was thinking this might come up. And, Steve at IU really blew me open to stylistic. I had a technical base, but I didn't know jazz standards. So, I didn't really have a vocabulary, a melodic vocabulary inside of me. And then I didn't really go back and I didn't really learn time vocabulary of Roy Haynes and of Philly Joe. I had technique and I had these solos, but when it came to a medium swing even, it felt like something was missing. And so Steve really shoved me into Ileana Elias and looking up all this Brazilian stuff. He do Ribeiro and you guys know. And then like Carlos Vega, because he's like kind of fusion guy. So he'd hit me to Carlos, and of course Vinny I was into, and Weckel. And so Steve's approach was really just throw me a bunch of stuff. I did a bunch of transcriptions and all this and that for him and did that, and that was amazing. So then I came to New York, and I had been taking a couple lessons with Ari off and on while I was finishing IU. And I came to New York, man, and I think the most beautiful thing in one's playing is this stage. And I'm still obviously until the end, I'll be on this journey. But Ari, we sat down at a few lessons. He was like, yeah. He's like, the only thing is you just don't have a sound. You don't have your own sound. He's like, what's Josh Roberts if I hear you? What is that? And that was, I remember it was a bit insulting. And I was definitely like, man, I don't have a sound. No one's going to know who I am. But after I freaking picked myself up, I was like, he's right. And he showed me, he's like, you know what? A lot of cats have like 2 or 3 things that they kind of just manipulate in every which way and whatnot. And then that's them. You think of Steve Gadd, you think of Vinny, you think of, da-da-da-da. I was like, okay, yeah, that's right. So what he did, he showed me the concept to basically take a groove, but really like some type of fill concept or something. And then you play it and just start permutating it over and over. So you don't just know. A big thing that I do is a grouping of 7s in triplet form. Instead of just knowing do ga da do do ga ga do ga ga do do ga ga do ga ga do, then you go do ga da do ga ga do ga da do ga ga do ga. You're pushing it over and over and over. You might not use it all the time, but obviously we know through permutation and practicing something a billion ways, you get comfortable, and then it becomes your vocabulary. And man, I did a few transcriptions, but I really focused on like, what does my time sound like now? So that was about 3 years ago. That's all I did was just try a couple concepts. And then I finally became okay with, if you scroll down my videos, you're going to see, a lot of these, like you're going to see that 7 thing. You're going to see some paradiddles, kind of some double paradiddles, and then you're going to see a lot of 5s. And that's kind of me, and I'm okay with that. I have this triplet tom thing. You're gonna see it tonight if you came out tonight, but that's what Ari did for me. And still, I saw him last night doing duo drums with Dan Weiss, incredible. And I still, man, I will never stop studying with him. I still saw him, and I have this gig coming up that's that's kind of for a few months. And he was like, and I was like, I want to get with you before I got to get in the maintenance, and figure out what's going on. So yeah, that's what Ari did to me, is he really still does, but really was like, what's your sound? So
Cool. Well, I wanted to sometimes on the podcast we do like a little book report sort of thing. So I wanted to do my book report today on someone else that I know has influenced you. And it was like, I think right around the time, like 3 years ago, I looked it up on Facebook when I added you. You posted a video of you playing Max Roach's The Blues Walk. And it was like a super cool transcription. I remember enjoying it. So I figured I'd do a little book report on Max Roach today and hear what you had to say about Mr. Roach. And I ran into a problem when I was trying to compile my report here. Someone like Max Roach that has such a long career and has played with so many people, to try and sum up his output in a short period like this is just impossible. So go read up on Max Roach, obviously one of the most influential jazz drummers of all time, but in very, very short order form here. Max Roach was born January 8th or 10th, it's debated, 1924 in Pasquotank County, North Carolina. When he was 4 years old, he moved to Brooklyn, and he grew up in a musical home. His mother was a gospel singer. At a young age, he started to play bugle and then drums. And then this is the thing that blew my mind. In 1942, at the age of 18, he subbed in with the Duke Ellington Orchestra at the Paramount Theater in Manhattan. Quite the start to a career there. And then in the 1940s, he was a pioneering artist in the bebop style. He performed, again, this is all when he was around 20 years old, performed with Dizzy Gillespie, Charlie Parker, Thelonious Monk, and Miles Davis. He became interested in Afro-Cuban music in the late 1940s and traveled to Haiti to study it. Then in 1950 to 1953, he actually attended the Manhattan School of Music to study classical percussion, where he was actually awarded an honorary degree from them in 1990, many years later. He co-founded Debut Records with Charles Mingus in 1952. And then he had many interesting innovations in his playing, one of which is that he began presenting solo drum set concerts in the 1980s to demonstrate the full expressive possibilities of the drum set as a legitimate instrument. He also had quite a few interesting projects, like he did a recorded duet with Oration by Martin Luther King. He was very supportive of the civil rights era. He did a concerto with the Boston Symphony Orchestra. He did a duo performance with video artist Kit Fitzgerald, and he had a jazz percussion ensemble called M Boom in the 1970s, which I looked on YouTube, and there's some clips of them, and it's wild stuff, like nothing I've ever heard before. Some of his influence in drumming is, if you think about, if you have like 1930s big band jazz sound in your head, like sing, 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 the pulse was usually kept on like pounding quarter notes on a really thudding bass drum, which is kind of tiring to listen to, truth be told. And so Max Roach was influential in moving the pulsing sound of the drum set to the ride cymbal. He also had careful attention to melody, and especially the way he would accentuate melodies with his drumming. And there was a quote from Stan Levy, and he said, "Because of him, drumming was no longer time, it was music." He helped develop the hard bop style, and he further expanded hard bop with the use of 3/4 waltz rhythms and modality. He was awarded a MacArthur Genius Grant. He's been inducted into the PAS Hall of Fame, North Carolina Hall of Fame, and Downbeat Magazine Hall of Fame, and he's received 8 honorary doctorate degrees. So, I mean, just a larger-than-life human being, and passed away surprisingly relatively recently in 2007. I remember I was actually in a drum set lesson at UNT, and I was not a drum set player at all. But my teacher was telling me, you can use straight 16th notes when you solo in jazz. I was like, hey, really? Can you? And he pointed to Max Roach on the wall. I said, yeah, that guy right there did. So yeah, Josh, I know that you are a Max Roach fan. Could you tell us how he's influenced your playing?
Man, absolutely. Shoot, man, he was the first guy that when I heard, I said to myself and my teacher at the time, I told him later at the lesson that was how I want to hear drums. Exactly how his solo and stuff was exactly how I want to hear drums. how I think it should be heard at that moment, and that, I mean, you're kind of making me think more and more of how much he's influenced me. But certainly I remember learning about his classical approach to things. And actually, this is funny. You'll appreciate this, because this is basically one of the biggest things that stuck out ever about me. Is my teacher had studied with Ed at UNT at one point when I was younger growing up. And he told me, he was like, Ed said, he was on the road with him, I think with Woody Herman, and then maybe Max was playing with somebody else or something like that. Ed said that Max would play the same solos sometimes on the same tunes night after night. Note for note. And in jazz, you're just like, that's against the rules, but Max would play the same thing. And he's like, if it fits and it works, then it does. And that's always stuck with me, as far as I do a lot of fusion, I do a lot of pop music and stuff. This band tonight is a great example. There's this one song we do, huge build up, in this fill, and I play the same fill there every single time because it just works. And I do remember consciously being like, man, this is another show, do I really play that? And I remember, no, Max, man, if he can do it, if something works, don't be ashamed of that. If it's going to work for you, then just do it. So that's probably the biggest thing, is being okay with repeating parts, and Max is another thing. You show me a bunch of, I could play from memory, a bunch of solos. You're going to see a ton of do do kaba do do kaba do do kaba do do kaba da ba da ba do, kaba da ba da do 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 do. You're going to see these fills over and over again. And that's what Ari is talking about. These cats, when you break it down, okay, they've got, I mean, some freaks like Weckel and Chambers and Vinny, have 60 things in their bag, but for the most part, you can kind of break drummers down and they have like 5 or 6 things. So I remember that was a huge thing for me with Max. But
yeah, it's so funny hearing you say that, because I was not from the drum set realm at all, and I learned at UNT and can play well enough to teach beginner drum set here. And with my students, I use the Morgan book, and like page 6 in the Morgan book is like downbeat figures, long sounds. And so it's their first time improvising, because you have to do a fill to set up the long sound. And there's 4 examples with written out fills, and then the next 4 examples it just says fill, and it's improvise.
Yeah.
And exactly what you're saying, like the very first thing students do is panic, and then like have to like remind them like that you're speaking from a vocabulary here, and so we use the pre-existing fills to create a new vocabulary. So like, okay, well, what if instead of working down the drums, you work up the drums, or instead of ending on the bass drum, you end on the snare drum? Do you have any sort of, I guess, I hate to keep on asking for like advice, but any, for lack of a better word, advice for younger players trying to develop that vocabulary?
Absolutely. And this kind of ties into social media too, this is a difficult concept more than ever today to stick to. But man, I took 3 or 4 solos and lived with it. I just lived with it and memorized it. That's huge. Cats be like, with their end of semester reviews or whatever, just buried in their stand. And man, if you love it, you devote that to a piece of you. You know what I mean? I mean, I can sing these parts to you from Max because I memorized some of these solos. And they're certainly, trust me, I know, crazy busy in college, and you can, you can't always memorize everything. You got to just transcribe something, play it for a lesson, and move on, for sure. But I would just say because it can be, again, with social media, with YouTube, you can have a zillion Max solos and Tony pops up and you can go down and you can just get discouraged and be like, crap, I got like nothing. Just start with the blues walk, or start with anything with Clifford Brown. Take one Clifford Brown album with him and start there and just live with it for a semester or something. And it's tough because I know we struggle with this concept of like, well, I'm going in just with my iPhone and playing to a few records when Carly over here, she has 15 transcriptions at the end of the semester that she can fly around and show. Listen, I had this cat in college that I had this this guy in college that just walked in with sticks, his ride cymbal, and his iPod at the time. And that cat sounded killing. And he just, because he lived with it, he just, so anyways, I would say pick a few and just live with them, wear them out.
Carly, I think you had a question.
Yeah, Josh, I saw on your website about your CD, Two Worlds. I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about the album and maybe some about the recording or collaboration process you went through with that.
Absolutely. So starting with the title, Two Worlds, I graduated my undergrad, and I was in, as so many people are, transition moment of figuring out, what's the next step? What are you going to do? And so through college, I was actually an RA to help pay for tuition and whatnot. For 3 years, I did that. And so I took a year between graduating college and moving to New York. And then I was full-time at a resident hall. I was basically a resident hall manager of it. Lived in and had a practice room that I rented. And after 3/4 time day or whatever, I'd go and practice every night, and then the weekends go to Indianapolis and play. And what that basically facilitated, it paid off the rest of my undergrad, and then it gave me finances for this album. And so I named it Two Worlds because at the moment, I really felt like I was conflicted. I had a lot of decent work around there, and I knew there was something better. And at the time, I didn't really know it was New York, but now I do. But I was, so that this Two Worlds basically represents, I was in it trying to practice and make the dream come true. But there's moments and seasons, I think, in everybody's life. Brad Meldau worked at Starbucks in Astor Place in New York for a while. Like, there's absolutely nothing to be ashamed about when you move here, because no one knows you. I don't care. Wayne Krantz told me, everybody who moves to New York or LA, wherever you want, just name it, London, you get in a line, and some people are privileged and know some people and maybe cut that line and get in different parts of the line. But he said everybody gets in a line when they move here. So
I remember when we talked with Bill Kahn a long time ago, he talked about when Steve Gadd moved to New York. Steve Gadd couldn't get gigs. Like, that's insane.
Yeah. So it's just, being patient. But okay. So anyways, my teacher, Steve Houghton, was really great about pushing me to write when I was in undergrad. And I would absolutely suggest that to any musician for sure, but definitely percussionist, drummer, whatever, because something about bringing out that melodic harmonic sensibility in you, it really changed my playing. It really made me aware of those things that are happening in any type of music. Pop. I was just on this session yesterday morning, and he said, man, it was a pop thing. And he said, man, I really appreciate you accentuating the string melody. And I didn't really think about it, but at the end of the day, it's not my 7/3 that's going to necessarily always get me a bunch of gigs. It's making this violist record or whatever sound great. So I digress. But so the album, I started in undergrad and then just finished writing it. And I was huge into Avishai Cohen and kind of Mark Juliana. Yeah. So it was basically a blend of like a little bit of Glasper. I was in a Glasper's project with Avishai. It came together, kind of made this triad jazz trio kind of record. And I'm still proud of it. So.
Well, Ksenia, I think you had a question.
Yes, I did. So for those who are watching, you guys might notice that Josh here has Rothko painting behind him. You have orange and yellow.
Yes.
And I want to know what's up. Please tell us. How much does visual art influence you? How did that end up on your wall?
Absolutely. And I'm becoming every day more comfortable with my sound and my drumming abilities and my, really just my sound. And my sound is staccato, articulated. When it comes to jazz, when it comes to trading or a vamp, I'm never going to play what I kind of call like Sometimes you'll hear a player, and stylistically it can be amazing. It's just not my style, but just kind of doing an ostinato on the feet, or doing some kind of in between stuff on the cymbals or something like this. I've always just been like, here's a vamp, and we're back. So meaning I like to know what's going on, and I like to make a clear message to everybody. And Rothko very early, when I was an undergrad, stuck out to me because it's simple, and it's, simple, but it's just, there's only a few, usually there's only those few limited colors. It's minimalist, and really I was I was telling my roommate, who's a sort of drummer, I was telling him that's basically what I'm doing more and more of these days, is like kind of trying to be the fourth man and pulling stuff back. But really, when I'm recording, no matter what it is, I don't even let a hi-hat go kind of floppy. Everything is very defined, and be it good or bad, I'm never going to be a Marcus Gilmore. I think that whole texture and sound wall is amazing, and it blows my mind. But I will never be that, and I'm happy. I'm fine. You're going to get articulated, very metered drumming from me. You're not going to get a lot of. I struggled with Elvin when Steve made me learn all this Elvin stuff. It was, it was loose, but it was still pretty metered, because I couldn't quite let my hold off on it. So now I'm just like, I'm fine with that. But so if that makes sense, that's a bit abstract, but.
No, basically you're the Rothko of drumming. So great job. It's a fantastic aspiration. Yeah.
Thank you.
Love it.
Well, Casey, I think you had some history to share with us today.
Yeah, sure. So, every week I try to let you guys know what happened on release dates, and just, of course, a lot of stuff happens every day, but I'll let you know what I can find. And relating to Rothko a little bit, they say Rothko is known for freeing color. And we often talk about composer Varese as freeing sound from its initial forms and melodies and themes and that sort of thing. But also Takemitsu certainly took it a step further. And we're releasing on February 20th. And in 1996, Toru Takemitsu died. And a few fun things you might not have known about Takemitsu: he composed over 90 film scores. His music gained traction thanks to Igor Stravinsky and Aaron Copland's love of it, and they consequently promoted it a lot. So he got played more and more. It's led to many of his commissions and etc. He wrote a couple music concrete compositions, so music that's recorded and then manipulated with just audio tape. And there's a couple electroacoustic pieces which are really cool. There's not many. You can check them all out very easily. The last piece he ever wrote was for solo flute, and he was working on his first opera when he died. Another famous composer who died in 1961 is Australian composer and pianist Percy Grainger. And Grainger said to have rejected all the traditional musical forms like the symphony, sonata form, etc. Said to be what's called a democratic composer, meaning he thought of every performer in the ensemble should have equal value and equal importance. He also created something called the Grainger Museum. And a fun thing you might not know about Percy Grainger is that in one of the sections of the museum is totally dedicated to his sadomasochism. Do you guys know this about Grainger?
No.
Yes.
Oh, cool. Oh, good.
Wait, do tell.
Not at all.
Do tell.
I'd like to interject. So at UNT, they have this graduate seminar over the summer, and they had some world-renowned Grainger expert come in to present, and he talked about that. And the UNT people had no idea he was going to go into that. So the front director had to be we're sorry, this was an external person. The University of North Texas did not we did not know that was going to come up.
Did he whip the students or anything?
Man. It's so funny because his music sounds so polite, but dude was a freak. And weird stuff with not gonna go into details, but weird stuff with his.
I'm gonna go into details.
I've
got details right here. You ready?
Oh dear, here we go.
So I found this little, so he calls it the Lust branch of his museum. And I always thought like, wow, build a museum dedicated to yourself. That's a little strange. But then as you keep reading, you see just like Ben saying, just how eccentric this dude was. But I found this little article on Atlas Obscura called The Lust Branch, Private Matters of Eccentric Musician Percy Grainger. And I'm just going to read like the first little bit from it because it's much better read than I can paraphrase it. So, Percy Grainger, considered Australia's most eccentric composer. In 1956, visiting his homeland from the United States, he deposited a mysterious locked chest marked Private Matters in his Melbourne bank vault with instructions, do not open it until 10 years after his death. Imagine the shock and scandal when the researchers and archivists who did the honors in 1971 discovered a Pandora's box containing more than 70 homemade whips, some fashioned out of conductors' batons, an extensive pornography collection, candid photographs documenting Grainger's fetish and bondage experiments in clinical detail. He stipulated that these intimate artifacts be displayed in what he conceived of as the Lust branch of this Grainger Museum. Anyway, on and on with more detail, and I just thought that was like really, really interesting, and I did not know that about him at all. So anyway, fun fact about Percy Grainger that if you're like me, you did not know. I thought he was just a polite composer of band music that you played in high school.
Man, that
was like a whole different meaning now.
Pretty cool.
He was ahead of his times in early 50 Shades of Grey, man. Wow.
Right. So anyway,
what else is in the Grainger Museum?
Oh yeah, right. So of course, yeah, there's lots of other stuff and his correspondence with lots of composers. Let's see here. I've got a little something among displays of original manuscripts and published scores, musical instruments, field recordings, artworks, photographs, books, and personal items, and his whips and other items related to his sadomasochism, which Grainger called the Lust branch. Let's see, the contents of his bedside cabinet and a gallery devoted to his mother's suicide. There are also sound-making devices Grainger used to make his innovative and experimental, quote, free music. So, of course, the bulk of it is his all the things for him as a composer and an artist. A couple other things in history, just scooching right along. First performance of Prokofiev's Lieutenant Kijé, which, we all had to learn the snare drum excerpt, and we probably have to teach the snare drum excerpt. That happens in 1937. We have another death. John Dowland, the composer, Ludus, English, dies 1626. And
Dowland.
Sorry?
I think it's John Dowland.
Oh, is that how people say it?
Yeah, even though it looks like Dowland. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I've always heard Dowland, but okay, you're probably right. And Kurt Cobain is born in 1967 on our release date. And I don't know if y'all are familiar with any of drummer Ringo Starr's films, but one of his films premieres, which is supposedly his X-rated film titled Candy, which is actually a parody on pornographic films, I guess. It's also sort of in that 60s, it's in 1969, that's like 60s psychedelic culture. It doesn't have a lot of like special effects and weird colors, and it's not designed to watch while you're high like a lot of those movies were supposed to be, but it is supposed to be a satire on the adult film industry. I tolerated a couple minutes of it, but I don't know. Yeah, it's bad. And it's called Candy.
If I could just interject a little Ringo Starr bit here, a lot of really, really fantastic drummers like to kind of knock on Ringo because he was not the world's most technically proficient drummer, but he was a great drummer for many reasons. And there's a cool YouTube video from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame that has a bunch of famous drummers, including Dave Grohl, Stuart Copeland, Max Weinberg, and Chad Smith are all in this video talking about how Ringo influenced them. And my favorite fact about Ringo Starr's influence is that when the Beatles premiered on the Ed Sullivan Show in 1963, at the end of that year, the Zildjian Company had a 90,000 cymbal back order because so many people wanted to play drums after watching Ringo play. So,
right. I think you said
what
that
you
before.
want about Ringo, but he's very influential, at the very least, in getting people wonderful drumming, which is fantastic.
I read when I was looking for stuff on Ringo that he's so accustomed to playing live shows that sometimes, your monitor is working well, sometimes it's not. He got so good at watching the other Beatles, watching their backs, and particularly watching their hips move, that he could find just visually, he trained himself to find the time of the other musicians, even if he couldn't hear anything well.
Yeah, when Ringo's time was so good, that's one thing people say about the Beatles and why they were able to do all the recording innovations they were, is Ringo could lay down the exact same tempo consistently every single time, every single take, and it made editing such a breeze. So,
Yeah.
it's not Dave Weckl, like, get over that, but he's still a great drummer in his own right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's just as easy to find praise as it is to find criticism. It's usually like little high school punk asses that are like, oh, I can play that. Oh. That's usually what it is. And that's it. That's what happened on February 20th.
That's awesome.
Well, thanks so much everyone for joining us today, and thanks especially to Josh Roberts. Be sure to check out that album of his, and we will see you on the next episode.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Josh.